newsmakers, analysts, and reporters were out on the Sunday morning talk shows, but only one gets the last word. And that honor today goes to the former Massachusetts governor and the former Republican presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, who joins us from San Diego. Governor, it's good to see you. I want to get up and go straight to the map here because I want your assessment as a former CEO to the strength of our economy. As you know, the government said on Friday the unemployment rate fell from 10.2% to 10%. And I want to just play out for our viewers, this is the job losses during the Obama presidency. The high numbers, 11,000, a relatively low number. You feel for those 11,000, of course, but that is the smallest number in the past year. Does that convince you, Governor Romney, that we have bottomed out and that growth, including job growth, is just around the corner?
Well, it's a helpful sign, a hopeful sign, but it's not the final word, of course, because you're seeing some Christmas hiring at retailers, but you're not seeing any improvement yet in manufacturing or construction. And until you see numbers there bottoming out, you're still concerned. Frankly, the stimulus didn't work. The president indicated it would hold unemployment at 8%. It rose to 10%. We have more people out of work today in America than even during the Great Depression. Not as a percent, but total number of individuals. And this is a national crisis. And we need to reshape this stimulus to make sure that instead of growing government, it actually helps people on Main Street growing private sector jobs.
Well, you mentioned that. I want to show that to our viewers. You mentioned the number of people unemployed. This is jobs in the recession. And you see as the rate goes up here, the rate goes up, that's 10.2%. It came down to 10%. But then if you look at this graph here as it plays out, you mentioned the unemployed persons in millions. In December 2007, 7.5 million Americans. Now we are up at 15, more than 15, approaching 60 million Americans. What should the president do in the short term? A lot of Republicans have said we're in this deficit. We can't round up more deficits. What should he do in the short term to create jobs?
Well, put the brakes on the stimulus plan, stop spending money on government, and instead create incentives for businesses to buy things and to hire people by, for instance, having a more robust investment tax credit, by letting businesses expense capital expenditures in the first year for the next year or two, by lowering the payroll tax. At the same time, stop all the talk about cap and trade. That holds back job growth. And of course, this plan to take over the healthcare system means that about 1/5 of the economy has put its brakes on and is not willing to invest because they're so concerned. Look, the president has to recognize that the only way we're going to get this economy going again is by encouraging the private sector rather than continuing to grow government. Massive deficits in growth of government is not the answer.
Well, let's look at some of the proposals he will lay out on Tuesday. It sounds like you would agree with some of them. I'm guessing you don't think they go far enough. But here's what we are told the president will do at his job summit ideas. A cash for caulkers, they're now calling it. People weatherize their home. You give them some incentives. The idea is you get more energy efficient homes, and you also hire people to come in and put in the new windows and take the other steps. Tax credits for businesses who hire new workers. A payroll tax holiday. Access to TARP, that's the bailout funds for small banks, and an extension of unemployment benefits. Is that a good down payment, a good plan in your view?
A number of those things reflect a good start, but they're not going to get the economy going again alone. You're going to have something far more substantial than that. And by the way, TARP has served its purpose. TARP ought to be ended. We've got hundreds of billions of dollars there that is being used as a slush fund by Secretary Geithner and the Obama administration. Stop the TARP recklessness at this point and get ourselves back to creating jobs by encouraging businesses to grow, expand their capital expenditures, and hire. And by the way, when you give people special incentives just to hire new employees, of course you give them an incentive to let current employees go. The best thing to do is to lower the payroll tax and to give businesses tax credits for making investment.
I want to turn, you mentioned the health care debate. The president's on his way up to Capitol Hill today. The Democrats are still trying to get 60 votes to move things forward in the Senate. As the health care debate continues, the bill you passed in Massachusetts as governor often gets mentioned. And it has had some pretty good success when it comes to expanding access. 97% of Massachusetts residents are now covered. That is by far the highest in the country. The health care costs for the state were a little more than $1 billion in fiscal 2009. And the state now predicts they will go up more next year. The cost of the program has been one of the questions in Massachusetts, and among the critics is a man you might see on the campaign trail should you decide to run again in 2012, the Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. Listen to this.
If you don't also contain costs and preserve quality, you're in big trouble. And the federal proposal is largely modeled so far after what happened in Massachusetts. They succeeded in extending access, but the cost of that program is now double, triple, and some would say soon to be quadruple what they originally estimated. That would be a bad development for those of us who are concerned about the uncontrollable rise in health care costs.
Does Governor Pawlenty have your plan right there?
No, I'm afraid facts are stubborn things. And the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation has taken a good look at the Massachusetts plan some 3 or 4 years after it was passed. And it is well within the original forecast. It's about a little over 1% of the state budget. And in fact, virtually all of our citizens are insured. And there's an important difference between what we did and what President Barack Obama is proposing. Number one, we solved our problem at the state level. Let states deal with the problem of uninsured individuals. And number two, we have no public option. There's no government option. And what's primarily wrong with the president's plan is that he wants to get the federal government into the health insurance business. It's going to require massive subsidies, $1 trillion of cuts down the road. That is not the right way to go. Instead, let states solve this problem and let them find their own plans. And by the way, if other governors can come up with something better than I did, congratulations. We'll copy one another. But the states should be the laboratories of our democracy, not a federal government one-size-fits-all plan imposed by Congress.
Let me move your attention to foreign policy. I'm going to show our viewers here the cover of Time magazine this week. It's his war now. President Obama greeting cadets at West Point after the big speech last week. 30,000 new troops. He says he wants to start bringing them home, send them in over the next 18 months, try to hurry, get most in 6 months, then start bringing them home in July 2011. You said this about the president a little more than a month ago. You said, I think he's made America less safe in that our friends are more concerned about the reliability of the United States. The president, of course, would dispute the fact he's made the American people less safe. But with this announcement, sending in 30,000 new troops, getting NATO to commit 7,000, do you see progress? Would you give the president a higher mark today than you did a little more than a month ago?
Yeah, I think he's made the right decision with regards to Afghanistan in general direction. His decision to support the surge, which, by the way, he did not support when it was an Iraq issue. His decision is the right decision. And by the way, you're noting that Republicans are not making this a political football. Republicans are saying, yeah, we're behind the president. He's done the right thing here. Took him a long time. That was a mistake, of course. I think he is mistaken also in sending these conflicting and confusing signals about the timeline, because you don't want in any way to have the people in Pakistan, the leadership in Pakistan, or the people in leadership in Afghanistan thinking that somehow we're only in there for 18 months and then we're getting out no matter what. That's not the message you want to have heard. And I also must admit that when the generals come to the president and say, look, we need a minimum of 40,000 U.S. troops, my first question is not, okay, how can I get it down to 30,000? My question is, what's the right number? If 40 is the minimum, is it 45 you need or 50? I think we may have been a little unwise to cut back on that number, but overall, is it the right direction? Yes. Has he made some mistakes in implementing it? Yeah, but we sure hope it works.
I may close. You are about to go on the book circuit early in the new year. I was at an event last night where Governor Palin was. Her book is doing quite well. Mitt Romney's book, No Apology, The Case for American Greatness, will be released in March. We're showing the cover to our viewers there. You going to catch up to Sarah Palin on the bestseller list? What's your secret for selling books?
No, I'm afraid I'm not going to catch up to her breakneck pace. I understand her publisher came to her with a $5 million upfront fee. My publisher's talking to me about a $5 million number, but I just couldn't come up with that kind of money. I'm afraid my numbers won't be very big. It's not a story about my life. It's a story about the challenges America faces and what I think we need to do to get America back on track to make sure we are, as we've always been, the hope of the earth. We're a very special nation.
And is it a book that you hope keeps interest in Mitt Romney down the road out there in terms of maybe running again in 2012?
What I hope it does is have people understand that we're headed on a course of a real uncertainty, that this nation could become eclipsed by China or Russia or by others, and that's the wrong course, that instead it's essential that America remains strong, and that the policies that are being adopted by the Democratic Congress and the President are weakening us in many respects, and we need a stronger America. I lay out why I think that's important, and hopefully people will listen and act accordingly.
We'll give it a read when we get it. Governor Romney, we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, John. Good to be with you.
Take care, sir.